I've been thinking a little bit about the Serenity Prayer. Probably everybody knows it. Let me see if I get this right. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Something like that. I think we know, if we look at this through a Buddhist lens, Buddhism is really, really good, even on the surface, at that first part. The serenity to accept the things I cannot change. This is really Buddhism's thing in a way. I used to joke, there should be a book, one of these things you get in the checkout line, and it would be Buddhism for worst case scenarios. Because that's what Buddhism is. It's for worst case scenarios. It really starts from the unflinching recognition that we grow old and we get sick and we die. That there are things we cannot change. Not just those things, but it starts there in that obvious way. And there's a gift, I think, that Buddhism offers in the face of those things, which is it gives you nowhere to go. When you receive that diagnosis, when you're watching your house burning to the ground, whatever it is, there's no reward for your suffering. There's no object of prayer to make it better. There's just this stark, immeasurable, inescapable reality. This is how it is. And so Buddhism offers, in a sense, a way to move directly and in a sense fearlessly through the stages of grief, however we want to define them. We accept it. Accept is a tricky word, right? Sometimes accept sounds like we embrace. It's not it. We sit with whatever it is. And we let that be reality, in spite of everything inside of us that is screaming for it not to be. Maybe we call that equanimity instead of serenity. Maybe we just call it honesty. But it is an invitation, it's a pathway to see things with clear, open eyes. What becomes tricky, I think, is that because we know that about Buddhism and about these teachings, we can imagine that there is no second part of the Serenity Prayer, the courage to change the things I can. And so a question that I get asked often is, it sounds like Buddhism is saying, I'm just supposed to accept how things are in a kind of defeatist way. That I'm not supposed to try to change anything, because trying to change something is imposing my will. It's fighting reality. We've talked about this a lot. In one way, it's very nuanced, because we keep circling back to the idea of this moment, the idea of the present moment. In the present moment, things are as they are. Even the things we can change, in this moment cannot be changed. Because we've already arrived here. And so on one level, this same acceptance that we apply to sickness, old age, and death, to those things that are beyond our control, we also apply to everything that is now. Because what choice do we have? Anything else would be dishonest. But there is more. There is something about the things we can change. And I'm going to come back to that. But first I want to go to the last one, the wisdom to know the difference. This is discernment. Right? The word most often associated with wisdom, the Sanskrit word is prajna. In Pali it's panya. We say the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra. That's the Prajna Paramita Sutra. And when we say wisdom, it can sound omniscient. It can sound like a secret knowledge. And I've tried to say, in as many ways as I can, that isn't what wisdom is. Wisdom is the wisdom that we associate with old age, that we associate with experience. And that kind of wisdom is a lot like discernment. And so sometimes we see this as the translation of prajna. It's discernment. You reach a certain point in your life when perhaps you have come to terms with those things that you cannot change. And so you know where you want to put your energy. Not into fighting those. Maybe into something else. That's discernment. You're not going to lose sleep over certain things. It's not a big deal, this kind of wisdom. It's rare. But it's also completely available if we're paying attention and if we're not always fighting back against the obvious. So we know that Buddhism is good at the accepting the things we cannot change. And we know that it's pretty good at this wisdom bit, because wisdom gets thrown around a lot. Which brings us back to the part in the middle. When I posted earlier about this talk, I said it was going to be about right consumption. And I realized later that may have sounded like I was going to talk about being a consumer, which honestly is another really important conversation. And maybe that's part 2 to this. Right consumption in 2 parts. But what I meant, what I was thinking, is something a little bit different, a little more subtle. It's not just about the things, the prayer says, the courage to change the things I can. It sounds kind of heroic. But again, it comes down to something more like honesty. And I'll speak personally. There are things in my life that I would like to change. I was thinking the other day, not for the first time, but for the 1000th time, how I long for a more contemplative life. One that doesn't have so much email in it. One where my phone doesn't make all these noises all the time. One where my attention isn't caught by a little red circle with a number in it that tells me that I really should check that, whatever that is. A life not just with less noise, less of a sense of being a puppet to something else. And I think I feel it acutely on a day like today. It's so beautiful today here. I think some people are not here today because it's so beautiful. It's a day to be outside. I want to be outside. I want to take long, slow walks. I want to drink in the air. I want to feel more like my relationships and my work are informed by those moments instead of this feeling that there's always another thing to do, that I'm always behind. That's something I want. I would like to change that. Here's where it gets tricky. Discernment, wisdom, means in part understanding which of those things are in the first camp, the things I cannot change, and which of those things I am consuming. That I am internalizing as inevitable, whether they are or not. Perhaps because I can't see a way out. Perhaps because it serves me to do it. Perhaps I am fed, consciously or unconsciously, by a story about being a victim of modern times. So what can I do? This is the way the world is. This is the way the world is. And I would like to say that I would love for my message to be, notice those things. Notice those things that are toxic for you. Notice those things that are that feel harmful. And just don't consume them anymore. And there are a handful of people who can receive that message and make sweeping changes in their life. It might be that you are in a position to hear that and say, you know what? I don't actually need to be part of that thing. I'll step back. And if so, that's wonderful. But for most people, it's not that simple. It's not that it's something you cannot change. It's that to do so has such consequences. Maybe you know exactly what those are. Maybe you don't, which is scarier. And so here again, what I think Buddhism invites us to do with this idea of discernment and this honesty is not simply to find the courage to change things, but to find the courage to admit to ourselves those places where we are making choices, those places where we are in fact complicit in our reality. Not because doing so changes it on a surface level, but because the demand here is always for honesty. Because it is important to know the difference between what we can change and what we can't. It is important not to live in a fiction, whatever we choose to do with that. This can be personal, it can be how you relate to social media, but it can also be systems of injustice. it's easy to feel like we're trapped, like there is no way out. But in fact, in many cases, we see things that are wrong and we're doing nothing to fix them. Our work is not pushing back. And so we are part of that thing. Knowing that matters. Recognizing that even as it is hurting us, even as it is hurting others, we are inside it, not simply being crushed beneath it. This too is discernment. What you do with that discernment is up to you. You may walk away from something. You may march directly toward the center of it to try to dismantle it. You may go on with your life exactly as you always have, but with your eyes clearer, with your eyes wider open to what this moment is, what this reality is. It may not feel good. No one ever said that it would. But it's absolutely critical. And I'm saying this to me. I'm saying this to myself. Looking at the things that I want to change. Comparing that with the things that I'm willing to change. Right now. I'm aiming this at myself in terms of what I see on the news and how I exist in relationship to those things. And I'm offering it up to you. Buddhism at its core is a long, steady look in the mirror, in a perfectly lit room. It's a gift. But it's a hard gift to receive. And that's where I'll stop.